Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. First-term Senator Claire McCaskill, Democrat from Missouri, is in a very tough re-election battle. In the past, she has campaigned with and supported the policies of President Barack Obama. This has put her in disfavor with many Missouri voters. The National Republican Party, sensing weakness, has targeted her race. 3 Republican candidates have filed to oppose Senator McCaskill on the November ballot. Congressman Todd Akin, Sarah Steelman, and John Brunner are the 3 candidates. To get to the November ballot, one must emerge victorious from the August 7th primary election. John Brunner is our guest today. He will describe why he should replace Senator McCaskill and sit in the United States Senate in January 2013. Mr. Brunner, welcome to Conversation.
Good to be here with you today.
So, normally I'm not taking shots, but I got to ask this question because I've had people ask me. They say, is this some new rich guy who's just looking for another thrill? I mean, you're not going out into space and spending $200,000 to take a space ride. You're spending maybe a couple of $1 million to be a United States Senator. Is that just a thrill, or why are you doing this?
Well, our country is in a tough situation right now, and our family business has been around since 1908. It's a manufacturing business. I spent time in the Marine Corps and then went to the plant floor. We saw all the ups and downs over those years, and there was a time in that family business where I had to put everything on the line, my wife and I, to save the jobs, save the company, and keep it going. You know, I've operated the forklifts, I've loaded trucks, I've did everything you needed to do to keep a small business moving forward, just like people are doing today, just like they've always done. Except today, the oppressive regulations that are coming down on everyone, the tax code's more complicated, it's really difficult.
Can I interrupt there for
Sure.
a second? When you say oppressive regulations, in your business, what sort of regulations, specifically, what sort of regulations do you find raise the cost of doing business?
Well, obviously all regulations have some cost element, and there are some regulations that make sense.
Yes.
You know, and some of the issues in safety and health, the Food and Drug Administration in particular, and you know, the Food and Drug Administration regulations were written in conjunction with business and industry many years ago. These are common sense regulations. But now what you're finding is the EPA in particular is coming down in terms of energy, and energy affects every business.
Yes.
And whether it's the price of gas to get to work, or the cost of shipping your raw materials, or the energy that goes into the plastic bottles and the raw materials, you know, these energy prices are causing businesses to be strangled and suffocated, as well as you have new laws coming in from the Department of Labor, new laws coming in from OSHA. There are hundreds of regulations coming in and choking everybody. Well, you know, I got to the point here after 33 years in manufacturing. I've seen the ups and downs of this business here and worked really, really hard. Sacrificed time away from the family, traveled all over the United States. The folks in the production line would say, John, we got things going here, go out and get some orders. And I'd run and get some orders to keep the jobs going. And for over 30 years, not one hourly employee ever lost an hour of work. It wasn't a goal, it's just we were working together as a team. So finally, after this grind for all these years, I thought, here's a chance to retire. We've got 6 grandchildren. You know, and maybe enjoy a little bit of life while the younger people take over the business and keep it running, and the next generations get advanced forward and get the promotions. And I paused for about 3 or 4 months. And I looked around and I'm thinking, how can I get back involved in politics? I've done this my whole life. I mean, every cycle I've been involved some way, somehow, even while running the manufacturing business. And I've been behind different political candidates at different levels all the time. I mean, I go back to when I was in 7th grade. I was involved going door to door, handing out books and Choice Not an Echo. This is the days of the Barry Goldwater campaign. And I'll never forget one person said, I would say, here's a book for you. It might help change your life and change the company, change the country, I'm sorry. And one guy took the book, looked at it, tore it in half, threw it at me and slammed the door. And I thought, wow, is that politics? But My parents were always involved in grassroots politics. I was inbred that, you know, it's a matter of politics is part of taking care of your country. And my dad and I would debate back and forth. I said, well, politics is so nasty. And he says, John, the problem that politics have such a bad name is that good people don't get involved. So here I'm at the point of my life here of saying, you know, a chance to maybe retire, enjoy the grandkids, take a break for the first time. And I've looked at what was going on here in Missouri and going on in the country and saying what we really need is a lot less politicians and people who've been in the real work experience. And so, of course, I started calling around to try to find some people to get engaged in the Senate race. And either people didn't want to do it or not for me or I'm not getting involved in politics. And someone said, well, John, why don't you look at this thing? And I said, surely there's more experienced people than myself. They said, you have the experience. You have over 30 years in manufacturing. You know about job creation. You know about how these issues work. You know the impact. And I went around the state and that was confirmed. I'm thinking, well, you know exactly right. You know, so, you know, I don't need a career. I don't need a job. I don't need anything. I'd love to enjoy the grandkids, but their future's at stake. And all of our grandkids are futures at stake. So that's why I got involved. That's my motivation, to get up there, get the job done, and come home. You know, to move to Washington, D.C., who would really want to do that? You got to be out of your mind. But if you want to take what you've learned and feel you can help people, you know, I learned in the Marine Corps to take care of the troops. I learned in the small family business to take care of the associates. And now I have one more stage here to say, what can I do to help take care of the country?
Okay, so now you're elected. It's 2013. You're a junior senator from Missouri. What are you going to do from day one on the floor of the Senate in Washington, D.C.?
Well, right now we have to get these jobs going back. And to me, it's real simple. You get big government out of the way. Americans love to produce. We love to open a new crate for new equipment in the factory, add acreage to our small farms. You know, so we need to go back and put a hold on these job-killing regulations so that entrepreneurs and small farmers know that, you know, they're not going to be burdened, they're not going to be crushed, they're not going to be put out of business. You know, second, we got to get an energy policy here that people can have confidence in, that they can have a lower price of energy, that their business isn't affected by that. I mean, for our business, if oil went up $20 a barrel, it would wipe out our profit for a year. We got to have good domestic energy policy.
It did just go up. Well, I mean, not that long ago, oil was selling in the 80s, and then it jumped to near 100. I'm talking about American prices, not the Brent prices over in Europe.
Well, of course, you have these cartels that are really controlling in the Middle East a lot of the oil prices. And the reason is that we do not have enough focus on energy in terms of drilling, natural gas. And I tell you, let's tie these energy prices and the regulatory environment together. Just a couple weeks ago, the EPA came up with new regulations for coal plants and coal manufacturing. Basically, we'll shut down coal plants as we know it here. And in fact, that will end our ability to get good, dependable energy from coal. 80% of Missouri is dependent upon coal energy. I mean, we have insanity going on here in terms of saying, do we really want to shut down the coal industry and the energy cost? Well, and then of course you have Obamacare, and that's in terms of a regulatory issue that is crushing, or will crush if it goes through, small businesses and increase the cost of health care. You know, small businesses and farmers are surrounded by this. I mean, I've experienced this at some level in the early 70s when I came on board, 80s and 90s, but you know, it's ramped up continually here. There's no end in sight. First day as a U.S. Senator, let's stop Obamacare. Let's go for a balanced budget amendment. Let's push back these incessant regulations and put a moratorium on it. Let's have an economic impact study on regulations, just as we have an environmental impact study. You know, these are the things that hit me personally for many years. These are the things that people across Missouri feel every day. And I tell you, even I talked to a guy who has a distributorship with John Deere. His business seems to be doing real well right now. But he says, John, I'm selling out because I don't know what next year is going to be. So whether you're starting to make it or you're barely hanging on, the whole attitude is hunker down. We got to stop the hunker down attitude. You know, Americans don't like that. It doesn't have to be that way. We can turn it around. Let's get some people in Washington, D.C. that get it.
If your business were running a deficit of $150,000 a month, I suspect that you would soon be out of business, wouldn't you?
Exactly right.
But the United States government this month, last month, the month before that, next month, month after that, month after that, month after that, is going to run a deficit of approximately $150 billion a month. These are issues that need to be taken care of right away. And I suspect that this is what you're referring to, but I don't know how you get to a balanced budget when you have when you have that much dislocation. We're spending $150 billion a month more than we're taking in. You want a balanced budget, and I'm not sure how we get from, well, here to there. Right. So that we do you have some ideas on this? Well, because just like in Greece, just like in Portugal and Spain and Italy, where they're feeling the pain right now, the United States is going to have to feel some pain.
Well, let's get back in terms of the spending. I mean, if you gave someone a credit card and said, go out and get some things that you need, clothes, things for the house, and they said, well, what's the limit on the credit card? He said, oh, there's no limit. You just get whatever you need. Well, we have all these Congress people and senators that all been issued credit cards to go out and do whatever they think is important to get reelected without a budget. You know, so we can't have a balanced budget until we have a budget. Now, I tell you, in my early days, my budget was my wallet. If there was cash in there, I spent it. If there wasn't cash, I had nothing to spend. You know, that's a budget. And you get to small businesses, and ours we did every single year for over 33 years. We had a budget, and a budget is setting priorities. We can't do this, we can't do that. And every other year was being a tough year, and some were average years. And I'll never forget my dad and I, after looking at the budget and saying, what can we do? Well, we have to hold off fixing the roof right now. We'll just put some buckets there to catch the water. We can't spend that. Let's do this. And that new piece of equipment, we have to delay that. Okay, we go through this whole process until we came up with a budget. And then he would turn to me and he says, John, you know what we need to do right now? The real answer is to go out there and get some orders. You know, so it's one thing to cut what you can, but we got to grow the business. And he was exactly right. You hit the road, calling on the Kroger, the Safeways, the Walmarts, the Walgreens, all these customers. We're interested in serving you. We needed orders. And the folks in the plant says, John, go out and get some orders. America needs orders. America's GDP after World War II was 49% of world GDP. We're down to 23% of world GDP. I mean, we have lost market share. You know, if we got 7% back, up to 30%, 32%, had that kind of growth, you know, the budget cutting issues wouldn't be as difficult. They need to be done, don't get me wrong. We got to pull back the credit cards. But too many politicians, you know, either want to continue to spend, a few there are trying to make some cuts, but far too few don't know how to grow the business. Now, there's a couple people up there that do. Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin. He was in a family business for 31 years. And he decided, after he looked around, what's going on and the problem that he saw in Wisconsin, we need more business people in there, more manufacturers in Washington, D.C. He got involved, never run before. And he's one of the hardest working people up there. And he told me, he said, John, too many politicians come to work every morning, too many senators thinking how to get their name on a bill, how their name on a building, to be famous. They're not looking at budgets, they're not looking at plans. And he said, have you ever tried to get anything done with 57 lawyers around a table? And then he hit me with a good one. He said, John, if you want to come in here and try to run for the U.S. Senate and watch all the good things that you've ever done torn to shreds and be hammered from all different sides, and you have the courage to go through and get through the other end and win this election, he said, we'll be able to double the number of manufacturers to 2, and I'll have someone to talk to. Now, you know, that's a good senator. That's the right motivation. He endorsed this campaign. And then Senator Tom Coburn endorsed the campaign. Tom Coburn, what's his background? He was an effective business person as well, and smart enough to go to get his MD degree.
I was going to say he's a doctor.
Yeah, he's a doctor, and man, He is known as a really tough fiscal conservative there from both sides. And then today we're announcing that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has endorsed this campaign. 3 million businesses represented on the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and very seldom do they get into primary campaigns. Why do they see this campaign? They see an authentic person who's worked from the factory floor, who's created jobs for over 30 years here in Missouri and continuing to grow and ship products all across the country. These folks need a true advocate, someone who's been in the trenches. They need a citizen senator. They don't need more politicians.
When you get when you get to the floor of the Senate, let's be realistic. Right now we're taping this. This is April 24th, 2012. Just a few weeks ago on the floor of the Senate, they were arguing over a total, I think, of $18 billion. Oh man, if you cut $18 billion, you're a criminal. You know, you're hurting certain, whoever it is that you're hurting, but you're hurting them. I'm talking about $150 billion a month. Now, think about it this way. There's about 300 million Americans. Half of them are getting some sort of government redistributive money. So we're talking about $1,000 a month, which is not outrageous, going to about 150 million Americans. That's what we're talking about in terms of going from 150 billion a month over to a balanced budget. And I don't know, and I don't think that anybody knows at this moment how we're ever going to accomplish that task. Your intentions are good, but the realities are that getting something done on the floor of the Senate, getting something through the House of Representatives, and getting a president to sign it is a tough deal.
Well, you're exactly right, and this is similar to a conversation that Senator Jim DeMint had with the senior Republican leadership in the Senate. He was complaining that we can't get things done. What's wrong with the Senate? And they came back, well, Jim, you know, that's just the U.S. Senate. That's how it is. That's how it always will be. You just can't get things done. And Senator DeMint said, well, we're just going to have to get a different kind of senator. We got to get different people coming in here. You know, there's a young man in Ohio, a former Marine like myself, running for the U.S. Senate. There are people now being engaged in congressional levels, fire districts, school boards, people who are jumping in because they have the experience to get it done. You know, it's not going to take a lot. Leadership needs just a few. And there's a core there who get it. There's a lot of people sitting on the fence. And of course, there's too many who are looking at which way to vote in terms of getting reelected. But if you vote for people whose sole job is there to get the job done, who doesn't care whether they're reelected or not, who's willing to put the sacrifice in and the service in, not the pay, not the pension, not the staffs, not all these things that attract far too many of the wrong people and get the job done. Yes, I'm optimistic if you get a few more in there to do the job. America is not off the cliff at this point in time. We're pretty close to the edge. And at the end of the day, you know, it'd be a lot easier for me and some of the others to sit back and say, well, I'll show up to vote in the primary for somebody, or I'll show up to vote in the general election, or I'll do what I can. But I am all in on this race. I'm all in because I see the problem, and I know that those who are running the Republican primary don't have the skill sets to do it. And I see Claire McCaskill, she doesn't have the skill sets to do it. She's part of the problem, along with President Obama. Hey, if we got to fix a problem, get the right person in. In fact, I was just thinking this morning, you know, we remember when President Reagan was shot, and they rolled him in there, and he was joking. He says, I hope all you guys, all you surgeons are Republicans, you know. Mm-hmm. And he always had a bright way of looking at things. But you know what? He didn't care whether they were Republicans or Democrats. By chance, by divine providence, whatever, there was a special meeting of some of the top surgeons there at that hospital that day. These were top talented people, and they left their meeting and they went right into the operating room. And I tell you, when you're hurting and you're in that operating room, you don't care if it's Republican or Democrats. You want surgeons who know what they're doing. When the economy is hurting like it is right now, it's not Republican or Democrat. Does the person you're sending up there know what they're doing, and do they have a record of knowing what they're doing?
Well said. Well said. You know, I was at a meeting, well, I guess it was a week or so ago, and there was a discussion. It doesn't matter what this discussion was, but there was a woman who was in the audience, and she said, well, you know, before, we all started paying attention in 2009. And I wanted to turn to her and say, where were you before 2009?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, this problem has existed for a very, very long time, the problems that the United States are facing today. And it goes back, and we also need people to be involved past the 2012 elections, thinking towards 2014, 2016, 2020, 2022, and so on, because it's a, what did they say? Something about the price of democracy is eternal vigilance.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Or freedom, that was
Right.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And we as a nation, we as people, have not been very vigilant over the last 20, 30 years.
Well, you're exactly right. Whether it was 40 associates in our business, and I worked, you know, shoulder to shoulder with these folks, or moved up to 1,400. These are folks that want to come to work every day, just give us the tools and the resources to do the job, and they'll do the job. They care. But they want somebody thinking ahead, planning ahead. You know, somebody who can put a budget. Are you thinking about next year, John? What about in 2 years? Do we have new products coming in? You know, you got to be, with that many people depending on you, you got to think ahead. And you got to have that foresight and that planning. The problem is, politicians have a very narrow planning focus. It's called election. And they start thinking about things right before elections.
I call this personality versus purpose.
Yes.
All too often, as you said, there's like 50, well, there's actually 100 people in the United States Senate, all, I'm a United States Senator. And it's like, okay, what are you doing with this power that the folks back home have given you? Well, what do you mean? I'm being a senator. It takes more than that. I mean, the thinking that I see we need to do is to have a purpose. And I sense perhaps that you do have a purpose rather than this is not just about you, this is about something greater. And I would like to see more in elected office that think more about what are we trying to accomplish as opposed to, well, I got to get reelected.
Well, you're right. When a sense of purpose or sense of motivation, why do people jump in and get involved in politics? And with rare exceptions, far too many people look at this. This is the best job they'll ever have. This is the best pay they'll ever have. They could get a pension. They could be a big shot.
I just found out it only takes 5 years in the Senate and you start getting vested.
Isn't it?
5 years?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a guy right over there who spent, I don't know, a couple of decades in the car industry and barely got out with, you know, enough to live off of.
What about our troops that are in harm's way? 20, 25, 30 years before they get anything? I mean, this is the problem. You put all those benefits there, it attracts the wrong kind of people. Where is this thing about a servant leader, you know, coming to serve? They
Right.
use the language, but has anyone cut back on the pensions and say no pensions? You know, I'll cut that pay in half, I'll cut my staffs in half. Yeah, it's too much in terms of that motivation. You know, and I tell you
Well,
what.
you've got to be planning to, I mean, part of the problem is that everybody has been trained, I should say the American public has been trained now to think in terms, what do I get? What are they giving me?
Right.
And all too often there are really, literally tens of millions of people who vote based upon, well, what am I going to get? I mean, I don't want to get you into trouble, but when you start talking about Social Security in any way that's meaningful in terms of reforming the process, all of a sudden, you know, you've got AARP and every other citizen, including my wife. I put the money in, I want my Social Security.
Right.
And yet there's some problem there with the money, being able to look off into the future, how we're going to be able to continue that. Medicare, Medicaid, all the other programs that have been established, because at one time we were rich.
Right.
Now we're not. You got 5 minutes.
Well,
let's talk. You know, make your last points.
And here's the issue. And I would encourage. You know, I know what it's like. You're working so hard at your job, taking care of the family. You know, whether you're going to church, involved with certain charities or organizations, running back, doing the same thing, paying bills, and you depend on those that are running an office to do the job for you. And you hear a talk and you hear a speech and it says, that sounds conservative, that sounds common sense. But you never maybe really had the chance to really drill down. And here's the problem that I have with my two Republican opponents, because I understand where Claire McCaskill's coming from. She just believes more government and bigger government is going to solve all the problems. And we know that's not working. But I hold accountable those in my own party and where they stand on the issues. And here's the problem. with Congressman Todd Akin. He's known as the top 25% of the biggest earmarker. I mean, that's the old-fashioned politics of bringing home the bacon. There's no bacon to bring home anymore. You know, he increased the debt ceiling limit 4 times. Well, you know, you're just kicking the can down the road. And voting for Medicare Part D, the deciding vote when it's in the House of Representatives, of course he voted against it when it came back down, but it was too late. They're not thinking about the fundamental issues in a business. I wish when I was running a business, I could just kick the can down the road and not have to make the tough decisions. And the same thing with Treasurer Steelman. You know, one of the big issues is tort reform. You know, you could run a small family business or farm and things are going great, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, you're sued for some crazy situation. Totally not at fault. You're defending yourself. She was the only Republican to vote against tort reform, the only Republican to filibuster against tort reform, and the only Republican to side with a Democratic governor on the overturn of this. You know, I don't understand and get that from where the people that I believe should be doing the job. You know, Treasurer Steelman also used, on a 1-year budget gap, and when she was a state senator, she used a 25-year note, an obligation, laying on the backs of Missourians for many, many years to cover a 1-year budget gap. You don't cover a 1-year budget gap with a 25-year debt. These are the kind of thinking and thought processes that just don't work. So that's why I'm motivated to get in here and make a very clean appeal to the folks here, is that you need someone who's been tested, who can fight, who understands where it comes from. I'll take that same fighting spirit as an infantry officer in the United States Marine Corps, the same fighting that I had to do for the jobs against the biggest competitors across the whole country in the United States to keep the jobs going. You know, I'm going to take the same thing here to the U.S. Senate, joins a few good senators here to get these jobs back here in Missouri and the rest of the country. I'm optimistic we can do it. I really, really am, because we have the right attitude as Americans, we have energy, and all we need to do is tell government to get off our backs and let us get back to work.
In just the little bit that we have left, what do you make of the Rasmussen poll that puts you, of the 3 of you, that puts you not at the top position, not in the second position?
Well, the polling data is a few points between all of us, but let's look where it came from here. I was nobody. I started nowhere. I wasn't been in politics for 15 years like Treasurer Steelman, or 25 years like Congressman Akin, or 30 years like Claire McCaskill. My idea is get the voice out to the people of Missouri, and to come from nowhere and to be equal with a sitting U.S. Senator, and within a few points of people who have been there all these years. I tell you, with these endorsements that are coming in, with the Chamber of Commerce, be getting around the state, every time I go to every community, I get more and more votes because the message is clear. Forget about the politicians, elect a citizen senator, someone who's had real skills for 30 years, who understands what's going on, wants to do the job, and get home. So I think it's a tremendous position we're in right now, and we're looking forward to the next few months before the August primary, and the general election is around the corner.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your coming here and spending time with us and explaining your positions. It's very much appreciated. To my audience, I've been speaking with John Brunner. He is a candidate for the United States Senate. He hopes first to win an election in August, the primary, and then face Senator Claire McCaskill in the general election this November. See you next time.